here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you.
You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you turn lives around. I worship you, I worship you. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Even when I can see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I can see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I can see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 That is who you are.
My God, that is who you are.
Okay, so I want to share with you one little phrase today, just one small phrase, and it's a little phrase taken from one verse, that's taken from one chapter, that's taken from one letter. And I think that if we can grab hold of this, if we can let it do its work on us and let it do its work in us, then it can change everything else. Because as Richard Rohr says, how we see anything is how we see everything. See, I'm sure that most of you have had those kinds of moments where you've read something, or you've seen something, or you've heard something, or you've experienced something, and it just somehow tilts everything else, and all of a sudden it's like your eyes have been opened. What I want to share with you is something that I've been working on, and probably more accurately something that's been working on me for a long time now, but it feels really relevant for for where we are historically and where we are culturally as a nation and as a world. It feels really relevant for the time and space that we find ourselves in today. It was a meaningful thing anyway, 8, 10, 12 months ago, but it's something that somehow has taken on more meaning now. But before we get to the phrase that I want to share with you today, I don't want to just read this one little short phrase out of context and then build a talk around that, because although that is something that gets done sometimes and can be useful, it's also can be dangerous as well. So we need some context. We need to know why this is being written. We need to know what's being said before it and what's being said after it. We need to look at the verses and the phrases around the verse and the phrase that we're going to be looking at today. And so I'm going to read a little bit of the letter that's leading up to it, and then we'll see where this one phrase takes us from there. Sound good? Okay, so if you've got your Bibles or your phones, we're in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, and I'm going to read from verse 4. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, starting in verse 4. Rather, as servants of God, we commend ourselves in every way, in great endurance, in troubles, hardships and distresses, in beatings, imprisonments and riots, in hard work, sleepless nights and hunger, in purity, understanding, patience and kindness, in the Holy Spirit and in sincere love, in truthful speech and in the power of God, with weapons of righteousness in the right hand and in the left, through glory and dishonour, bad report and good report, genuine yet regarded as impostors, known yet regarded as unknown, dying and yet we live on, beaten and yet not killed, sorrowful yet always rejoicing, poor yet always making many rich, having nothing and yet possessing everything. Wow. That's how to write a letter. Just the sheer beauty in how that passage is just crafted. How Paul lines these things up in these beautiful couplets. There's almost poetry to this bit of the letter. And that ending, that's the phrase, having nothing and yet possessing everything. So straight away from this part of the letter, it's safe to say that Paul and his friends have been through the mill. He talks about riots and beatings, imprisonment, torture, hunger, sleepless nights. They're known to them and yet they're treated like strangers. They're genuine and yet treated as fakes or frauds. They're sorrowful and yet always rejoicing. They're poor and yet they're making people rich. They have nothing and yet they possess everything. And that's our phrase today. Having nothing or owning nothing and yet possessing everything. Now the big thing here, it's the thing that's been kind of working on and growing in me, is this distinct difference that's showing itself through this passage. This distinct difference between ownership and possession. Having nothing and yet possessing everything. Is Paul talking to the Corinthians and talking to us about ownership and possession. You see, you can own something and not possess it, and you can possess something and not own it. Ownership and possession are two different things. Now, when we are allowed to go out and are allowed to go away places, I quite often like to visit different cities and different towns within the UK for one reason and one reason only. It's not for the shopping, it's not for the restaurants, it's not for the hotels, it's not for the big sightseeing spots really. The main thing that I like to do is go and visit cathedrals. It might sound a bit geeky. I don't care. I just love it. And so whenever we are anywhere near a potential spot that's going to house a cathedral or one of these old ancient churches, I kind of have that look in my eye and I look across to Janine like, can we please? Like it's a sweet shop or a toy shop or something. But no, it's a cathedral. And I love to go and visit all of these different cathedrals and just walk around and just soak it all in, soak in the atmosphere. I don't need to go on the tour. I don't need to visit the gift shop. It's just being there, walking around the outside of it, walking around the inside of it, taking it all in. I love it. Leah and Janine, probably not so much, but hey, it's my cross to bear. Well, it's their cross to bear, really. But yeah, I love to spend time in cathedrals. These old buildings, for some reason, and I can't explain it, it's mysterious, it's mystical. For some reason, they just do something to me. They speak something within me. There's an energy that I feel in those cathedrals. Now you can look into all of the history about why they were built and why they were placed where they were placed and the shape of them and the type of architecture that was used, and it all has these reasons behind it. But until you are in there, until you feel it, there's just an energy within places like that. Now, I didn't design the cathedrals, and I had nothing to do with building them. And I don't own the cathedrals, obviously, but there is a possession that's happening in those moments. I'm not quite sure whether I'm possessing it or it's possessing me, to be fair, but there's something going on there. But the truth that I see here, and it's a truth that you'll all experience in your own different ways, is that you can possess something without owning it. Cathedrals might not be your thing, but something else will be. There'll be somewhere that you go or something that you experience that just there's a weightiness to it. It just feels a different way, and you feel that possession, even though you don't own that place or own that space. It's got nothing to do with who owns it, and yet it does something to you. And this isn't, as I said, this isn't just limited to cathedrals. That's probably not your thing. But any kind of building usually, or any kind of architecture or sculpture is intentional. Everything is designed for a purpose, and everything does something to us. If you were brave enough, you could go so far as saying that architecture is shaping our souls. It's why matter matters. It's why spaces and places mean so much to us. They take on almost an identity of their own. It's never just a building. That's not just your house. It isn't just a church. It's so much more. It's so much deeper. It's about possession. It's why there's so much space devoted to describing things like the tabernacle and the temple within the Hebrew Bible, because these places matter. It's why so much important stuff takes place upon mountaintops and under trees and in specific locations. It's because these places matter. They work on us. They shape us. They communicate a particular story to us. I don't own these cathedrals. You don't own these buildings or these monuments or these sightseeing places or wherever your space is. But they possess us. It's about having nothing and yet possessing everything. So on the one hand, you can own something and then not possess it. But you can also possess something, whether that's beauty or a voice or truth or awe and wonder. You can possess that without ever actually owning it. Now you hear this a lot whenever people go to far off places, either on holiday or on missions. Maybe you've even experienced it yourself. So someone goes from one of these first world, Western, wealthy countries, and they travel from that spot to a third world country or to a less wealthy country. And while you're there, you're somehow just hit by these extreme levels of poverty that you're experiencing and that you're witnessing firsthand. And yet within that poverty, within that owning nothing, they've got something. They've got a way of seeing life or a way of living generously, where even though in the way that we measure things, they're poor, actually they are rich. I'm reminded of the time that I spent at Belarus and how we would travel from place to place and village to village and town to town and even to people's houses, and these people had nothing, and yet they would give it to you gladly. We stayed in this little house, the lads did, and there was nothing in there really. And one day there was a knock on the door, and one of the guys from the village had brought a TV. Somebody in one of the other houses in that village had heard that there were people from England staying to come and put these concerts on, and they donated their TV for the 10 days that we were there on that trip. And so he happily, with a big grin on his face, came and delivered this big black box TV to us and gladly and proudly placed it down in the living room for us and wired it all in and queued it all up and did that thing with the weird little metal aerial until we got some kind of semblance of a picture. And he was so happy with himself, and of course we were grateful and we said thank you. We couldn't understand anything about the shows and the channels that we could get from it, but I don't even know where that TV came from. They had nothing. Just the clothes they were wearing and the food they could scrabble together, and yet here is this TV, and they would gladly give it to us. And over again we can share stories about how we would go somewhere, and even though it was Lent and they were on this strict vegetarian diet, wherever we went they put a big food platter out and there'd be meat and vegetables and potato and fish and you name it, it was there. And yet they weren't eating. They were on Lent, they were fasting. Or the food that you were eating was their food. We went to I think it was kind of like a cathedral. It was an old church the one day on a day when we weren't playing anything. We were just going around on a bit of a sightseeing day. And we got given this kind of red cabbage soup that was just like, wasn't my sort of thing at all. And I was kind of like messing around and stirring it around the bowl and not really eating it. And then one of the guides that was with us informed us that we were eating the nuns' dinner. They were going to have nothing that day because all they had was this red cabbage soup, and they'd given it up so that the guests could have something to eat. I felt very bad then and promptly ate all of the red cabbage soup with thankfulness in my heart and a tear in my eye, if I'm honest. But I know that others of you have had similar experiences like that as well when you've gone to places like Thailand and various other places. Whoever you speak to, they'll tend to say the same things when they come back off these trips. We hear that all the time. You think, yeah, that's what everybody says when they come back from one of those trips. But do you know why it sounds cliche? Because people will come back and they'll say things like, we went there thinking that we were going to give them something, and yet they ended up giving us something in place of it. We went there thinking we were going to show them, we were going to teach them. We were these sophisticated modern people from the West, and yet we came back humbled and blessed and just taught so much by these people, given so much by these people who we considered to have nothing. We hear that all the time. It sounds cliche, and the reason that it sounds cliche, the reason that we hear it all the time from people who come back from trips like that is because it's true. Because it's true. And it all comes down to this difference between ownership and possession. Having nothing and yet possessing everything. Now hear me right, I'm not saying that ownership isn't important. This isn't me saying, don't own anything, sell all that you've got and give your money to the poor. It sounds like somebody else once said that, but this isn't me saying that. But I think that what Jesus was getting at when he called these original disciples is that he's calling them into a life that is more than a life simply about ownership. And in fact, you can read loads of stuff and yet still, you can own loads of stuff and yet still miss out on possessing the thing that really matters. What good is it if you own the world and yet lose your soul, yet don't possess the thing that matters? See, apparently when someone gets to their first million, they spend all of their time worrying about losing that million, or suspicious of others around them, wondering, are they just my friends because of my money? Or who here is looking to steal my million? Or taking all that time and energy stressing and straining and striving to try and earn more. They say, a million's not enough, I need 2 million. And then 2 million's not enough, I need 3 million. Because you can own millions and millions of pounds, but not possess what really matters. Faith, hope, love. Take marriage, for example. You can own a marriage certificate. It has a date and a time and a location and witnesses and signatures, a very official document that proves this binding legal agreement that's taken place between two people. You can own that certificate and yet not possess the wonder and the joy that it is to share your life with someone else. There's a difference between ownership and possession. But our society and our culture and the world that we find ourselves in evaluates worth and success and ownership on a very surface level, doesn't it? It's all about the external. What do you have? Our world cries. What do you own? Show me your stuff. What have you achieved? What is it you've got in your garage? What's in your bank account? And that's just fine. That's an absolutely fine way to evaluate worth and success and who owns what. It's a fine way to kind of parse out things until it isn't. See, by only staying at that surface level, only staying at that external ownership level, fails to go deeper, fails to plumb down into the depths, into this deeper level of experience and of possession. Because when you think about when you were most alive, when you think about when you have felt the most like you and like, this is what I'm meant to be doing, this is why I've been put on this planet, when you felt most alive, or when you've heard other people talking about those kinds of experiences, it's never been about stuff and external things and the things that you own, has it? It's never been like, I finally got that Apple Watch and now my life is complete. Now I understand why I am here on this planet. I finally got the iPhone X. I finally got that car. We finally got enough money for that house. We finally went away on that holiday and now my life is complete. No, it's just empty because it's just surface level. No one ever gained their kind of aliveness and their withness in those ways with ownership. No. Instead, it's about being caught up in an experience where you join in or you participate in something bigger than yourself. It's got little or even nothing to do with the stuff that you own. That's why competition and comparison robs us of our joy, to quote C.S. Lewis. That's why looking around at what everybody else has got, what other people own, only fueled by social media these days. It's all about, look at this person's stuff, look at what they've got, look at where they've been, look at what they're eating, look at who they're with, over and over again. We're just barraged over and over, our senses just smacked in the face over and over again about this comparison game. And it just robs us of our joy. Because only focusing on that just ends in misery. Because if I only ever focus on that surface level stuff, if I only ever focus on ownership in this way of living and looking at myself and others, it quickly turns into, they got that, and I've only got this. Or, look at them, they've still only got that. Which is only one step away from living a life of scarcity. Where if you've got that, then it means I don't. But a better way to view this, a better way to play this game, this ownership versus possession game, and what I'd suggest is one of the things that Jesus came to show us, is this. When you see someone who is succeeding, when you see someone who is achieving, when you see someone who owns a lot, don't look at them in bitterness and jealousy and envy. Or don't try and emulate them thinking that you can get it too. Or don't look at them thinking they've got it and that means I won't. No, when you see someone who owns a lot, celebrate with them. It might feel weird to you to start with. It might feel very weird to them as well. But this movement from ownership and to possession is everything. It's a game changer. Don't obsess over who owns what. And the next time you're feeling that kind of green-eyed monster of jealousy creeping in, look that other person in the eye and say, I'm so happy for you. Possess their joy. Instead of thinking, why'd they get that and not me? Or, wow, they got that. Where's mine? Instead of thinking like that, think, if they got that, then what could come my way? If that's what they've achieved and if that's what they're able to possess, then what can I get? Moving from scarcity into abundance, moving from not enough into plenty, moving from ownership into possession. I love where this passage that we read or listened to at the beginning, I love how it starts in 2 Corinthians. It's right at the beginning of this section where Paul says, we commend ourselves to you. It's as if Paul is saying, we come to help you wake up to all that you actually already possess. All that's good and true, the grace and the joy and the hope and the love that you already possess. See again, just as there's this difference between ownership and possession, there's another difference going on in this passage as well. A difference between materiality and presence. Because there is the material, there is the physical objects, the materials, the stuff of your life, the things that you put in your garage. But then there is your presence to your life. And those two things are very, very different. This is what's been happening during this pandemic, during this lockdown, during self-isolation and staying indoors and keeping yourself to yourself. There's lots of people in their homes with the ones that they love for prolonged periods of time that they would never normally be spending time together in. Millions of people have been forced to slow down. And people who have no choice but to be present in their own lives in new ways, working together, playing together, preparing and cooking and eating meals together. It's all about togetherness. And it's all about presence. And these two things, presence and possession, rather than ownership and the materiality of things, it's presence and possession that actually work together. It's why someone can be talking to you and they can be openly and honestly and sometimes vulnerably sharing something with you. And you're so present with them in that moment In those words that they're speaking, you are so present with them that even though it's their story that they're telling, in some mysterious way it becomes your story. Owning nothing and yet possessing everything. So right now, if you're struggling, if you're feeling hopeless, be present with others and their hope. Essentially, possessing someone else's hope. When you are feeling no hope yourself, possess someone else's. Be present with others who are hopeful and possess that hope. If you're finding it tough and feeling really weak today, then rest on someone else's strength. Be present with them and possess theirs. If you don't have any answers at the moment, then lean on someone who does, possessing everything. Back to that first line again. We commend ourselves to you. It's as if it's saying, this is a gift. We are giving you a gift. But sometimes it's really hard. That's what you see in that long list. We have this list of gifts, but sometimes the struggles that are involved within those gifts as well. Sometimes it's understood, and sometimes it's not. The same goes for you. And the gift that you are, the gift that you give to the world today, sometimes it's appreciated, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes complete strangers are so grateful for you and what you do, and sometimes the people closest to you seem to just completely ignore you. Yeah. That's what Paul's getting at. That there's this gift, and the gift is you. There's this gift that only you can give. But your joy isn't bound up in how that gift is received by others or not received by others. Because if it is, then your joy is going to come and go just as often as that gift is received or not received. If it's bound up by how others respond to you, then it's not joy. Joy isn't bound up by how the gift is received. The gift is in the giving. We commend ourselves. We give ourselves. Why? Because that's where the life is. And it might be received, and it might not. And we might be loved, and we might be hated. We might be understood, and we might not. It's not guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed. But we give anyway, because the gift is in the giving. And to keep on giving, and to keep on giving, and to keep on giving. That's presence. That's possession. Amen.